Hello, everyone. Yehuda Shamroth here. Welcome back to the Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston, who lives in Yerushalayim, Shel Zahav, with me. And I'm here live from Jerusalem again, like last week. This is in a different area of Jerusalem with candles in the background because it's Hanukkah. And we wish you, all of our viewers, a happy, wonderful, blessed Hanukkah. Lots of light in your lives and lots of light to the world. We should bring the hostages home right away and end this war. And thank Rabbi Winston for every week putting so much effort and time and beautiful Torah into our lives. And please don't forget to check his website, 36.org, and his other website, alternate website, shardnonproductions.org. And I'm from the Miriam Project at Ul Hour. And without further ado, thank you for joining us, Rabbi Winston.
Thank you. Okay. Chanukah Sameach, Chanukah, Chanukah, all these nice things that we say at this time of year. Chag Sameach also. Why not? We were speaking last week about the two numbers that represent the hidden light of creation, just to refresh people's memories, or for those who weren't there last week. But if you open the Chumash and you start from the very beginning, the first pasuk says that Bereshit Elokim Hashemayim v'Haaretz, in the beginning God made the heavens and the earth. That's the second verse, that there was null and void, and there was darkness upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered above the waters, right? And then the third pasuk says, "V'yom Elokim yihi or, v'yihi or." And the third pasuk says, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." And traditionally, I mean, from the verse itself, there's nothing really specifically to indicate that it's any other kind of light. And for the longest time, it's easy to think that it's the light that we're used to. Today we have artificial lighting, but in the beginning, you had fire, and you had, of course, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all that. This is the light that we're simply talking about. But all you have to do is open the Chumash a little bit further, and then you realize that the light that we're used to didn't come into the fourth day. And it was made, according to most commentaries, on the first day. That everything was made on the first day of creation. And then it was just put into place. It's like, manufacturing all the different things that you're going to put into a house, different factories and all that. And finally, when it comes time to move in, you pick it all up and put it in different places. So same thing, Hashem, had already made the sun, the moon, the stars, but only on day 4 did they start to operate and function, because they weren't where they're supposed to be. Kept them in the storage room in the meantime, and then he put them in place. So then it begs the question, which light are we talking about? On top of that, Rashi explains on the 4th verse, where it says that Hashem is Mavdil ben Or and the Choshek, between the light and the day, the light, the darkness, and called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And Rashi is a Pashtan, as he often tells us. In other words, he's somebody who he knows a lot more than he's saying, obviously, but he's not telling it to us because he's not interested to tell us here what those deeper things are, because his job, as he says, is just to help the Chumash to make sense to us on the simplest level, on a pshat level. And so therefore he rarely strays, veers off course from what he normally does, except here he does. He does when he feels it's necessary for pshat. So he mentions in the 4th verse that the Havdalah that God did, even though the pasuk reads fine the way it is, we don't have to ask any questions. It's you don't read Rashi, no questions here. Light, darkness, day, night, fine. But Rashi says, no, you need to know something. And what do you need to know? That when Hashem was mavdil between the or and the choshech, it wasn't what you think, because that's going to happen on the 4th day. But what it really is what the Gemara talks about in Chagiga on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, where it mentions that the original light that God made in creation was a very unique, powerful light. And that is, it was with this light, Adam Arishon could see from one end of the world until the other end of the world. And that's pretty hard considering the world is round and not flat. And anyhow, whose vision can see that far. But this light was obviously some very special light with a very powerful reality to it, and that God realized. It's a little hard to say he realized. He already knew. It's all built in, because everything by definition for God has already happened. So he didn't want the evil people of history to be able to access this light. They can access this light, right? Incandescent lighting, fluorescent lighting, all the other type of lights we have today, and the sun, the moon, the stars, they can use that light just fine, right? So then which light we're talking about? Well, the supernal light, the beginning light, the light that God made the world with, the original light. And so therefore he hid this light. And for tzaddikim lasilavu, for tzaddikim, the righteous people of the future. But in the meantime, the light is hidden. Now, where? So it's mentioned that there are 4 places that the light is hidden. One is in the 36 hours of Shabbos, because in Gan Eden, the light shone for 36 hours for Adam Arishon. It served, it's the lashon of the Gemara, it served Adam Arishon for 36 hours, and you'll tell me no, Shabbos only has 24. And the answer is because Shabbos also kind of starts early from Chatzot on Friday afternoon, so therefore we include those 12 hours of Erev Shabbos plus the 24 hours Shabbos, 36 hours altogether. 36 Masechtas tractates of the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, has 36 different sections to it, and somehow it's embedded in there. You are probably aware of the fact that in every generation there are 36 tzaddikim called Lamabav tzaddikim, the Nistarim, the righteous people who you might know they're righteous, but just not how righteous they are, that the world basically exists because of them. There's almost 8 billion people in the world, and they're not enough of a reason for creation to continue, especially given how much bad is going on in the world, and their merits of their life, what they're doing, that's enough to keep the world going. So in their merit, the 36 tzaddikim, right? Somehow they have this light too. They have access to this light as well. And then the 4th place is an incredibly unusual place to actually find the light, because given the fact that the number 36 doesn't show up anywhere with respect to Chanukah in the Gemara says you have to light a menorah, right? It says, my Chanukah, later on, explain how Chanukah came to be a holiday, but it just says you have to light a menorah. And then there's a machlokas, a disagreement between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, classic. They always argue on everything, it seems. Just a few places they agree. And according to Beis Hillel, the Iker mitzvah, the main mitzvah of lighting a menorah is just 1 candle every single day for 8 days, to commemorate the fact that A, we found the jar of oil, and B, that the oil burned for 7 more days and it had fuel to burn. Right. So everybody agrees, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai both agree that the main mitzvah is just 1 candle every single day. In every household lights 1 menorah, 1 candle. Then you have the Mehadrin, right? The Mehadrin is that you light extra candles each day, or according to Beis Shammai, just the opposite. You start with 8 candles, and then you go 7, 6, 5, and they're both based upon sources. Beis Hillel says because you're always supposed to go up in kedusha, you should always try and increase the kedusha, so they're 1 + 2 + 3 + 4, right? And according to Beis Shammai, it goes after the sacrifices brought during Sukkot time on behalf of the nations of the world, because there we start off with 14, then 13, then 12, and we reduce the number every single day until the end of Sukkot. And Sukkot and Chanukah are very much related. In fact, Chanukah is often referred to as a Sukkot in the winter, so to speak. In other words, it's like a very strong connection, because Shmini Atzeres is not really part of Sukkot, but it's 8th day, and there's a whole connection between the 2 realities. But that aside, it doesn't mention 36. It just mentions add or take away, but either way, you just happen to end up with 36 candles at the end of the 8th day. It doesn't say make sure to light 36 candles. If you only light 1 candle every day, you've done the mitzvah, because that's what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. They didn't light an extra candle every single day, because it burned extra in every day, another day. But it happens to be memela as a net result of adding these candles, or starting off with, again, both opinions, right? You end up with 36 candles altogether, no matter who you are, who you go by in the end. So that seems incidental. So incidental. So it's unusual that one of the 4 places that the Orah HaGanuz, the hidden light of creation, the light that God hid on the first day, should also be in the Ner Shel Chanukah. You don't find it by Purim. Now, you can say, well, Purim is its holiday and it's got its thing. And Chanukah is its own, thing. But since the Or HaGanuz is what the world began with, and that's going to be the reward in the world, or later on, even Yemos Mashiach. And the truth is, as Aleshim explains, you can even access this light on some level, depending upon who you are, some level already, because the hiding of the light was that it will not give off light, and we're not talking physical light, clearly. We're talking spiritual light. And I see the light, right? What an illuminating discussion. Doesn't mean that the lights went on, they added more, candles. It means that somehow intellectually it's a brighter perspective than we had before. But the whole aspect of creation comes down to this light that's going to be the reward later on, and the Or HaGanuz is the basis of Chanukah. We're being told by the Bnei Yisachar, and that's significant. Also, given the fact that the 25th word of the Torah also is or, is light. In fact, the verse is Vihi Or, right? And this Or, which I'm now saying is a special light, it's not the everyday light that we have all the time, it's so available to us, and it depends on the person who's using it. But it turns out that this when God made the world with this light, it was really the thread of all history. It just happened to take 36 generations before the holiday of Chanukah came along, but the basis of Chanukah itself goes back to the beginning, which is interesting because Purim is the last holiday to be batal. Chanukah is already going to be eliminated as a holiday in the Messianic era because, as we've spoken about before, every holiday that we celebrate is not a commemoration only. It's actually a door opening up. Imagine you're opening a door, they have, in I don't know, in books and stuff like that, but you open the door, and on the other side of it is not a room, but it's like a whole different dimension, right? The door is like a regular door, and you open up, and there's a whole different dimension. So when we celebrate Pesach, we're actually accessing a light from a different period in history, to Chis HaMesi, the later on era of the Messianic era. It's not from now. Every day we have the light of every day, which is why life is so mundane. But in Pesach time, we're at that time we're celebrating the light from the future Messianic era and all the Chagim as well. So Chanukah is the light of the Messianic era. It's the light of Yemos HaMashiach. We're not yet fully. We are in Yemos HaMashiach. We're not. It hasn't finished yet. The final act of Yemos HaMashiach, but certainly we're living in that era right now, unquestionably. How do I know? We've had those discussions many times before in the past. But in the meantime, this is the basic idea. So, but we're still waiting to have the conclusion when Mashiach will come and end all the wars and evil's gone from the world and there's no more Bechira and we're free will anymore. That's the end of it. That's the final act. So Chanukah is that light. So in the meantime, Chanukah is still a holiday because that's the only way to access the light on the 25th of Kislev. And Purim is the last holiday to be batal, to be eliminated according to the Medrash, even after Yom Kippur. First go the Chagim, before 6,000. Then in the 7th millennium, Shabbos stops being a special day because the light of Shabbos is every day. And then the next, but you still have Yom Kippur and Purim to celebrate, even in the world to come, if you imagine that. But I don't think people are getting drunk. We don't have to anymore. And then comes Yom Kippur in the 8th millennium, and that's no longer a holiday because every day is the holiness and the light of Yom Kippur. No fasting, there's no need for things like that anymore. All that's the way we celebrate the holidays now is because of the body we have. But in those times, we'll be totally spiritual. Even the bodies will be spiritual at that time, and therefore, not as spiritual as the soul necessarily, but spiritual nonetheless, like Adam's was before the sin, even more so. But Purim will still be a holiday in the 8th millennium. In the 9th millennium, we finally get to the level of the sphere of Chachma, then it corresponds to that period of time. So then Purim will stop being a holiday because every day will be the light of Purim, which is very counterintuitive because Purim seems to be even more so than Chanukah because of all the rowdiness, all the noise, all the wildness and all the partying and all the, it's a holy holiday if you understand what's going on and how to celebrate it, but it's so easy to misuse Purim more than any other Chag because the activities lend them, just the fact that you're giving people a heter to drink to the point of drunkenness. When did we ever do that? So many people don't. And many poskim have said, no, it's not being used properly, so don't do it anymore. But if you understand how to do it, yeah, 100%. You're not getting drunk to lose control of yourself, to lose your das. You're getting drunk to neutralize the body so your soul can run free and reach higher limits that will teach you how to live for the rest of the year. Like Yom Kippur itself, but even less so on Yom Kippur. That's why it's called Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim. So how is it possible that Chanukah could be so primordial, so central to everything, to all of history, or at least the light behind it, and Purim is the last holiday to be bought, which seems to be on a higher level? So it's not as hard a question to answer if you know Kabbalah. But you know Kabbalah, because that's really the clue to the whole thing. And we are trying to explain how to go from 25 to 36, because 25, as we said before, represents the light while still hidden in creation. 36 means the light has been revealed. To go from 25 to 36, conceptually, that's a discussion. Mathematically, it's simple. You just need 11. And 11 is the number. It's the key. It's the clue. It's the basis of all that we're living to accomplish in life. It's the rectification of creation, because 11 lights were left unrectified. So this 11th theme carries out, there are 11 days between the solar and lunar, calendar every year, because the Jewish people are compared to the moon, and we're here to rectify the world. And there are 11 spices of the incense offerings, which corresponds to the das, which means, godly thinking, that was offered in the base of Mikdash. So there are a lot of 11s that indicate, that's why there's also 11 days journey from Mount Sinai to Eretz Yisrael, as the Torah points out in Parshas Devarim. These 11 keep showing up because 11 is the key. But the question is, what is it? How do you access it? So lots and lots of books have been written on this topic to answer this question in one way or another. Lots and lots of shiurim have been given also for the same purpose. Tonight, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach, but it's the truest approach of all. You have to understand something. A lot of times, especially in Kabbalah, but in Torah in general, and in everyday life, we do the same thing too. But you hear it more in Torah. You hear it more in Kabbalah than Pshat, Remez, and Drush in Gemara. It's Ki'ilu. It's Ki'ilu, right? Did this really happen? Well, Ki'ilu would happen, which basically means as if it happened that way. Didn't really happen like that, but it could have been like that. The Totza'ah, the result that came out was the same result. So it's just as much could have been like that. For example, right? If you talk about the spheres and what creates what and how history unfolds, it's all about lights moving around. This goes on, this goes off, but it's not true. In fact, when I used to live back in Toronto, when I was younger, my father, he was an interior designer, and he often had to do signage for different jobs that he had, and he worked with a specific company to produce the signage. But they were also sculptors. They make this very interesting light sculptures. And then one year, as an appreciation for all the business they got from my father, they gave my father a light sculpture, which became one of our things in our living room. And it was one of the most fascinating things. I used to love this thing. It was in a plexiglass box, right? Two sides, rectangular, actually square. And inside was like a circular thing, like spokes, or like wires going around, but spokes all across the entire thing, all the way. It looked like a bicycle wheel, in a sense. Right, and these spokes had little lights on them. These small little lights that I forget what they're called, but they could be calibrated. They could be, timed. So these guys were geniuses. And what they did was they made the lights in a circle like this, going in like a spiral, and they had the lights go on and off exactly on cue. So as one light went off, the next one went on. As that went off, the next one went on. So what happened, if you stare at this thing, it looked like the light was moving. It looked as if the light was going around in a cycle like this, but it wasn't. It was just lights going on and off, but on time. So that's how the brain works. You can fool the brain in so many different ways. How many times do we think we see something that turns out to be something else altogether? The brain makes assumptions all the time. We're always making assumptions. We take a certain amount of information, and the brain processes it, but it turns out the brain's not always right. A lot of times it can be very wrong, unfortunately. And you can think you're looking at something, you're not seeing something, and even when it comes to ideas, and some of this is intentional, but that's how often works, right? So the lesson, for example, points out, after talking about lights moving in the upper realms of the spheres and everything, he says, but don't make a mistake. It's not, no light actually moves. It's just lights going on and off. But ki'ilu, it's as if it's moving, because the net result and the way it looks and how things work, that's what would happen if the light actually did move. So why doesn't? Because it doesn't need to, because how the nature of the light, it's a longer story. So this idea of ki'ilu is a very important concept that we could often get fooled by in the process of understanding how the world works. But it's for all intents and purposes, sometimes you need to go back and understand what's really going on in order to be able to appreciate what the truth is. If you go far enough and you go deep enough into an idea, because you have to understand something. When we learn something, when most people learn, the point of the learning really is just to, we need to survive or to get ahead, to accomplish things. And some people like to learn just for the sake of learning, but we tend to stop short as much as we, as far as we go, based upon what we think we need. So, for example, you hear an idea for the first time, it's always abstract. You don't know what it is. And you might even let it just go. I'm not interested in it. I've had people tell me, when it comes to a couple of things, I'm not interested. It doesn't work for me. I don't want to hear it. It stays abstract for them. But for the person who says, it's an interesting idea, it catches your attention. You might sense there's some benefit in there, or you just want to understand what it's all about. So then you will start to examine the idea, and the first thing your brain will do is look for familiar concepts, familiar aspects of it. Is there anything about this idea that I recognize from past experience? If there is, then you'll note that. And if there isn't, at some point in time, you may just simply have to absorb this idea into your intellectual vocabulary and expand your mind. And that's how we become smarter. And that's how we become more capable of understanding and relating to more things. But if any idea, no matter how mundane, the most mundane concept by definition, doesn't just pop out of nowhere and appear in a vacuum. If it's down here in this world and it's true, by definition, it has to have its root at the very source. And when I say the very source, I mean the most sublime, holiest of all levels of creation that most people are not even aware exist. By definition, because that's the source of everything, of all ideas. So therefore, if a person takes a concept and they research that idea, why? I once was told by somebody, not the source of this idea, but if you ask why enough times about any concept, eventually you'll hit a wall. Even the most simple, common idea that you think you understand fully, but why this? Well, because of this. Why? Because of that. Because of this. You go back far enough, you'll always hit this wall. And the reason why you'll hit a wall is because at some point in time, you'll get back to the abstract roots of the concept. And unless you have the background information to understand it, it's not going to make sense to you. But you can apply it. Does anybody know in the physical world what energy actually is? I mean, we know because the Torah tells us it's a spiritual concept. But those who don't believe in God, don't believe in the spiritual world, only the physical world, do they know what energy is? No, they don't know what energy actually is. It's just in the universe. They see it, they've proven it, and they know how to use it, how to harness it. Because you can harness energy just by understanding how it works. But understanding how it works doesn't necessarily mean you understand where it comes from, and why it even exists in the first place. Thank God it does. But energy is just God at source. But if you're not going to go back that far, but if you do, you'll find him. Anybody who's honest enough about truth to pursue it, and everything they learn is inevitably going to end up at the doorstep of God, which is why people don't want to do it. because they're afraid to find out that's the case. As if on their day of judgment, they will be able to say to God, "Oh God, I didn't know you existed." You know, that's the famous joke about the atheist who falls off the cliff, is hanging there for dear life, yelling up, "Is there anybody up there who can help me?" And a voice says, "Yes, I can help you." "Great, who are you?" "God." "God, wow, amazing. I didn't believe in you until now. Boy, what a time to find out you actually exist. Can you help me?" "Absolutely." "What do I have to do?" "Let go of the branch." "Is there anybody else up there who could help me?" Right? It's a big risk. It's a big step for a person to take, to believe in God and change their life, because they think that their life is going to be miserable, that they're going to be enslaved, that they're going to have to. It doesn't make sense anyhow. The only reason why they get away with it is because God lets them get away with it for now, but not necessarily later on. For sure, not later on. It always no one gets to have their cake and eat it too, unless it's a kosher cake that they're eating in the end. But the point is that if we look at the Or HaGanuz, according to Kabbalah, that light is so sublime. The level of that light is so sublime. The reason why the light had to be hidden, the Torah says, because God did not want the evil people of history to use it. Okay, fine, a pshat level. But the real reason is because this light is so holy, so sublime, that if that light were to enter our world on the level that it exists, none of this could exist. Not us, not the world, certainly not free will. None of it. It would just destroy everything, because the light's just too sublime. It's too infinite. It's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction to our reality, as it currently exists. Because we're so physical and the light's so spiritual. You combine them, it's like matter and antimatter, in a sense. So therefore, the light remains on a high level, very high level. The actual hiding of the light was not so much the hiding of the light as much as the world's descending downward. We moved away. It's like God and Adam in the Garden of Eden. Right? God says, "Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you do today, you're going to die." He doesn't anyhow, right? And now he's hiding the bushes. And God says, "Ayeka, where are you?" "Over in the bushes." "Why?" "Because I ate and I wasn't dressed properly. God's coming over. Did you eat from the tree?" "Yes." "Out." But man hid. We talk about God hiding, but the actual hiding of God, where do you hide him? How do you hide? God's everywhere. He's in everything. By definition, God can't go anywhere, not because he's limited, because anywhere is God, by definition. So anywhere he goes, he's there. So how do you hide God? Well, you don't have to. It's ki'ilu he hides. But it has to do with our perception, right? Amalek divides the name of God, but he can't really do that. So what does he do instead? He attacks us. He puts doubt in our heads, in our emotions. And then ki'ilu, it's as if God is hidden, but what's really happened instead is we've been hidden from God by not being aware and conscious of how bad things can happen to good people and other things like that cause us to question God's existence. So the reality is that the world hid from the light, not so much the light hid from the world, because otherwise we could not exist, history could not exist, and evil could not exist. And without evil, you can't have free will. Yeah, you need tzaddikim. So how is it tzaddikim can therefore access the light? Because the Leshem says the hiding of the light was that only people with the proper character traits can access this light. So how does that work? Because they're getting the 11. Because if you're accessing the Or HaGanuz, if you're taking a concept and you're asking why all the way through, you're breaking down the idea to get down to its essential truth, you're accessing Or HaGanuz, because that's the source of all the ideas. All the knowledge we have can be traced back to that light in the beginning. So then why is it so mundane? How can we access it? Because layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer is added over the light. It's like looking at the sunshine with sunglasses. And if they're not good enough, you put special filters on those glasses. Eventually, you're not really looking at the sun per se because it's been filtered so much, but you see enough of the sun to know what you're looking at. But you can't see it full blast because if you did, you'd go blind. The point of looking at the sun is not to go blind, it's to see it. Same thing. That this light gets covered over with levels of reality and levels of reality until light becomes so mundane because the light is so reduced in its intensity, but not at its source. Inside, it's like the soul inside. It's powerful, but layer upon layer blocks the light from coming out. It's like taking a light and putting it inside of a bag. If you put a light inside of a thin plastic bag, the light goes right through the wall of the bag. If you put it inside a brown paper bag, you can see a little bit, right? But not that much. You put oil on the side of the brown paper bag, it makes it more translucent. You can see more of the light. So you put another brown paper bag over another brown paper bag over another brown paper bag. Eventually, you can't even see the light. It's inside there, right? So this 11 they were trying to access, interesting enough, is less about the light and more about the container. What does it mean? Well, it's very simple, right? Everything you want to take a glass of water, for example, right? If you want to have a glass of water and you put it inside of a plastic bag, it's kind of hard to hold it and drink from. You can do it, you can sit there, fooling around with the bag and holding it like this and trying to spill it through the little spout if you can. It goes all over you in the end, right? But it's not a fitting container for the water. So you take a cup, right? Something more solid, excuse me, and you fill it up, and it works because the Kli can contain the liquid, but it can't contain all liquids. What if it's molten, lava or just molten metal? You're smelting, metal, and it's red hot, and you pour it into a paper cup, it burns the cup up. Any cup is going to destroy it. So you have to make special things. You ever see these big, huge iron containers they put, this molten metal into to form beams and things like that? The Kli has to fit the material go inside of it. And that's why they ask the question, how is it possible for the soul to go inside of a body? Because the soul is so much more spiritual, so much more powerful. How does it not burn up and destroy the body? Because it should. Because the body is so much less spiritual than the soul. And Kabbalah explains because the origin of the soul, believe it or not, comes from a higher level in the spheres than the soul itself. So even though the body right now is still quite physical, it's got this potential to be able, it's a miracle in the end anyhow, it's just really a miracle, but we're still stuck with this whole thing. And this is a concept you should know all through creation. There's a special section, the Leshem, just called Kli v'or, the Kli and the Or. And how is a Kli made? Because we take this for granted, but making a Kli, when you live, existing in a world of infinite divine light that's so sublime, there's nothing we could compare it to in any way, right? And somehow it makes a Kli, and eventually even a physical Kli, if it actually even exists, not just a figment of God's imagination, right? But it's all about the Kli. It's all about the Kli. So really, Ke'ilu, it's like drawing the light down, but that's not what's really going on. Because if you think about it, a tzaddik, right? A tzaddik, a righteous person, somebody who accesses this light, right? A tzaddik is somebody who, by definition, is on a much higher spiritual level, is able to access the light in the ultimate sense, right? So how does he do it? Well, if you take a look, you'll see it's because of the fact that he has rectified his Kli. He's rectified his body. That's the main thing. That's what he's accomplished. The learning of the Torah, the doing of the mitzvahs, all of that has had an impact. His soul is his soul. The reason why his soul is more powerful and having a greater impact on him is because the Kli itself is able to access that soul more so. It's able to express itself through the soul, through the body even more so. So it's really about the Kli. And this is what learning Torah is all about. This is what working on your midus is all about. This is what everything we're trying to accomplish. Having your cake and eat it too is somehow not working on your midus, not refining your body, and still wanting to access the light. It doesn't work. And that's why you find hypocrisy. And that's why you find inconsistency, where people learn a lot of Torah and can, right? And the church at one point in time knew the Zohar backwards and forwards, right? Lots of people learned Torah over generations, including ourselves as well. And you can know all this Torah, and yet you don't end up being the Tzam Elokim that the Torah speaks about, the Adam Shalem that the Arizal speaks about. How is it possible? Because the light's not really in the Kli, right? It's separate from it. Somehow you learn, but if it was in the Kli, it'd be mashpia on the person, and automatically you'd be a tzaddik. That's what a tzaddik is. A tzaddik is somebody, it's not just a big, there's a Tamil Chacham, and there's a tzaddik. And you can have a tzaddik without even being a Tamil Chacham. But you certainly have a Tamil Chacham without being a tzaddik. The trick is to be both in the end. But how do you do it? By refining the Kli. Now, having said that, we can now go back and look at something very interesting, because the Medrash says the following thing. The Medrash says that when Yaakov Avinu went back for the Pach Katan, right, Parshas V'yishlach, he's sending his family across the river, going back and forth, back and forth. The last thing he does is go back for a Pach Katan, small jar. And the Gemara says that actually the Torah says he endangered himself. Well, the Medrash says that God said that for endangering yourself for going back for the small little jar, I will reward your descendants in the time of the Chashmonaim with a small little jar. What is the connection? What is the connection? How does it work? Right? Okay, so he went back for smaller jars. So that's the Pach Shemen they found in Chanukah time. They with the seal unbroken. Why? Why is that the issue over here? So there's another medrash. You got to put it all together. I mean, a lot of this, it's just about being a weaver, a sewer, taking the sources that already exist and just putting them together, and they tell the story on their own. And the Yaakov Avinu says the following thing. He says, you should know that Yaakov went back for across the river, where did it come from? Well, that was the same jar he found in Parshas Vayetze after he woke up from his dream, and he built a monument because of the dream, and he wanted to anoint it, because that's what we Jews like to do with these things, and anoint them with oil, Shem and Zayas. Where are you going to get it from? Right, Har Sinai. But he found a small little jar, and he figured, oh, this is obviously the Shemayim, who put it there, who cares, right? But Shem and Zayas, and he pours it over the Mitzvah, and he looks back in the jar, and notices that the oil's still there. Didn't go away. Even though he could see it, it anointed the Mitzvah, the thing that he made, to commemorate where he was, and he comes back to it later on. Thank God for what happened to him, the dream, and all the good news. So he says, this is spectacular. This is fantastic. This oil clearly is miraculous. I'm not leaving it behind. So he takes it with him. And the Yaakov Avinu says, every miracle that happens in Tanakh is with this oil, with Elisha, Eliyahu, right? The Shunammite woman who's poor, and they take oil and fill. Why oil? Of all the things, you want to make her rich, give her money, give her donkeys, give her horse. But why the oil? Because it's what was available to do this miracle all the time. So it fills up and fills up until they run out of kalim. There's no more kalim anymore to fill up. No more vessels anymore to fill up with this Shem and Zayas. And it gets passed on. Eventually, they anoint the different things in the Mishkan, but the same oil, the Kohanim, the same jar of oil, one little jar of oil. And the Medrash doesn't go all the way to the time of the Chashmonaim, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, or a quantum mechanics professor to figure out that the oil that the Chashmonaim found was the same jar of oil that the miracle happened with. In fact, it burned for 7 extra days. It could have kept burning forever. They produced more oil because that's the mitzvah, but they didn't have to stop. They stopped using it. They actually didn't stop using it. They kept using it in the Ner Maravi, but the same oil. So now we understand the connection with the Medrash, right? Because you went and you endangered yourself for this Pach Shemen, it's going to be around later on, and I'll protect it from the Greeks in the time of Chashmonaim. What's special? Was it the oil that was special? Well, clearly, it's miraculous. Or the kli, or the vessel. In fact, the Torah doesn't mention it has anything inside of it. From the Torah itself, it sounds like it's just an empty jar. That's the way people learn it. It was just an empty jar. Why go back to an empty jar? It doesn't. So Gemara gives a different answer. The Gemara says because tzaddikim are so worried about stealing. Really, a tzaddik has to worry about stealing? That they value their property more than their own bodies, as we learned from Yaakov. That's a different discussion, but it doesn't talk about the Shem Zayas, only but the Kli. And you should know there's gematria to do the Kli and the Pach and this and that thing, but it's the Kli. It's like everyone's looking this way, it's like a magic trick. I once was at, during one Pesach, they brought in a magician for the children. It was kind of like an amphitheater type of a thing. So the seats curved around. And I sat all the way around the side there, away from everybody else. And I guess the magician didn't notice that or didn't care, right? But because of that, everybody else was in front, as to be expected. I could see from behind him. I was actually able to see the trick in action. I was watching him manipulate, move balls with his hands. You could not see from the front, and he was very good. If I had been in the front, I also would have seen it, but I was from the side. And the whole point of the magic trick, clearly, and I actually once saw a thing about this, that is to convince the people that all the actions taking place over here is really taking place over here. So people take watches off people's arms because they're so busy looking over there, they don't notice the watch being taken off. There's obviously skill involved too, but it's not magic. It's just distraction. Amalek, we're magicians. They're great at distraction. That's how they work. So this idea of being able to manipulate things, it convince you that this is what's taking place when in fact it's not taking place at all. Is a large part of what Amalek does every day in life to convince us to do things that we're not supposed to do. But the bottom line is that the Kli itself, that's the focus. We're so busy looking at the oil, and rightly so, not to diminish the importance of the Shem and Zayas. I mean, everything applies to it, but not at the cost of the Kli. Because ultimately speaking, that's what changes everything. Because that das, Shlomo HaMelech writes in Mishlei, he says, if you pursue it like money and buried treasures, then das Elokim you will find. It's an interesting lashon he uses. What does that mean? Well, what does a person do when they want to become rich and famous? What do? They want to become an athlete. They want to become an expert at something. What do? Some people, very few, are born with exceptional talent. It does not take them much to be able to ace exams and to succeed at whatever they do. They have this golden touch, seemingly, but that's not the vast majority of the population. Many, many, many people who succeed, it's because they changed themselves. They had to. They went from being lazy to working hard, long hours, exercising, sacrificing pleasures, like not eating foods they enjoy so that they can keep trim and fit and they can run faster and pole vault, higher, whatever the case may be. Or to be a businessman, to really successful, they never ask the families, what was it like living with so-and-so, because you don't usually get such good information, like such positive. It was terrible. He was never home, never around. And when you do get that, that's usually what you hear, because it's almost impossible to become a top 500 Forbes magazine, company, unless you inherit it from your parents or somebody else, but without having to put the time in. And that time should come to someplace else. But they change themselves. Okay, not necessarily for the most meaningful thing, and maybe it's not ultimately worth the sacrifice. But that's what they did. But in this case of a tzaddik, right? He's been changing the Kli. The light will come. That's what Shlomo Melech is telling you. You want to go, find a treasure. What do? You get in a boat. You sail halfway around the world. You sit there, going through jungles and digging up. You just persevere. It just doesn't come to you. You don't say, "I want to bury treasure." Sit in your living room and it shows up one day. It's not usually the way it works. That's not what life is about. So he says, if you're prepared to change yourself, you're prepared to do the work, you'll get Das Elokim. You know why? Because you'll have transformed the Kli. And I always, that's one of the, for those who light with candles, it's not the same thing. Really, try it. Shem Zayis. At first, it's a little awkward, especially used to using candles all the time. But if you're used to Shem Zayis, which is compared to Tamach Chachamim, and if you use it on a regular basis, it makes you wise. It's the menorah, but there's something. It's not just the oil burning, but it's the Kli with the oil together. In fact, someone told me just last night, in fact, that one of the Chedushim of Chanukah is the fact that both coexist. Because usually, as the Gemara says, you can't eat from two tables at the same time. You can't be Ruchani and Gash at the same time. Not completely, not both completely. You're going to sacrifice one for the other. So you can be 80% Gashmi and 20% Ruchni, or vice versa. But the more you give to one, the more you take away from the other. That's just usually the way it is. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he held up his hands and said, that even though I was a very wealthy person because I was the prince of the Jewish people, I didn't get any personal pleasure. I made a point of it. I could have, but I wouldn't have been Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the one who organized all the Mishnayos and is famous for his Torah, not for his wealth. Because if I had done that, I'd be famous for my wealth and not my Torah. And that's not my chelik, that's not my ticket to the world to come. So by Chanukah, right, even though you really are burning up the wick, so to speak, and you really are consuming oil, it's ke'ilu that they're both coexisting, the physical and the spiritual. Because when you become the proper type of a kli for this light, you ascend. The light's not really going to come down to you, because then it would be down here in this world, just like Shabbos. Shabbos doesn't come down into this world. We go up to the world of Shabbos, to a higher level. We walk the same face of the earth as anybody else, but our consciousness on a higher level. The level of Gan Eden, actually. We didn't do work, which is why you can't do work on Shabbos, because it's not necessary. Adam Arishon didn't hoe the ground, didn't water the garden. He learned Torah. He davened, spiritual things. That was pardes. So that's what Chanukah is telling us. Chanukah is reminding us that the light's there. It's hidden. It's hidden because until you become the proper kind of kli to hold it, it's off limits to you. It would destroy you. You wouldn't be able to live. You wouldn't survive. But if you really want it, you want to access it on whatever level you can, rectify the kli, become a kli for the light, ascend, and then the light will come to you. And then you will be the means to transform the light of 25 that's hidden into the light of 36 where it's revealed. That's the source of personal rectification, and that is the source of world rectification, and that is what it means to live in the Messianic era. Chanukah Sameach, for Chanukah, we should be zeichet to reach those levels, Shabbat Shalom, and as Yehuda always points out, we should see the end of this war, end of all wars, and all the evil in the world, B'ezras Hashem, and Klal Yisrael should finally have peace after all these thousands of years.